Welcome. I'm Jeremiah Reiner, and this is the Deeply Rooted Podcast. Hey there, welcome to Deeply Rooted. Thank you for joining us wherever you're at and however you may be listening. A brand new episode coming your way right now. We're really looking forward to a good conversation on the topic of church planting. And before we get into that, I want to remind you again, go on over to our Facebook and like us there, and also add us on our Facebook group page. You can check us out daily as we're putting things on there for you. You can also interact with other listeners. It'd be great if you went on over and subscribed and hit that like button on our YouTube channel and on Apple Podcast. While you're over there, leave us a review. That'd be great. That would help us out tremendously in getting the word out and also hearing some feedback from what our listeners like, don't like, and areas that we can improve. You can check us out on our website as well. That's deeplyrootedpodcast.com. If you're looking for all the archived episodes and ones you haven't caught up on, the link is there. That'll take you directly to our YouTube channel. You can also read our blog post and check out our upcoming ministry schedule. And speaking of that, we've got one coming up right around the corner. I'm going to have the privilege of preaching Sunday evening coming up here on March 12th at Bass Chapel down in Cigarsville, Tennessee, to celebrate their 75th anniversary as a church. So big shout out to those guys, friends down there in the Cigarsville, Tennessee area. Looking forward to that. That's going to be at 6 o'clock that evening. Also, March 25th, we'll be at Calvary Bible Church, our home church there. 6 o'clock, our good friend, Brother Josh Tompkins, is going to be in the area preaching for us that night. And really geared more towards the younger audience. So if you've got high school, middle school, college-age students, and you're around the Duffield, Virginia area, we'd love to have you. Again, that's going to be at 6 o'clock that night in Duffield, Virginia, Calvary Bible Church. And then don't forget also, make sure you register for the Deeply Rooted Conference. That's going to be coming up November 10th and 11th here in the Tri-Cities. So you can register there on the deeplyrootedpodcast.com website. Try to get those early bird rates in while you can. Prices will eventually go up later on throughout the year. We're really excited to have Brother Mike Abendroth coming in from Massachusetts. He's going to be our keynote speaker there. And we're also got another lineup as well of some really, really good pastors coming in to preach from all over the Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia area. So it should be a really good time. We're going to center it around the doctrine of assurance. So that's going to be the theme there for the Deeply Rooted Conference this year. Again, November 10th and 11th there in the Tri-Cities area. So I hope you can register and join and be a part of that. Now, like I said, we're going to be talking tonight about church planting, and really excited to have a guy on board with us here this evening online who I've known for a long, long time. And as a matter of fact, we are together in the whole church planting process. So he is our other elder and pastor, and we're glad to have on. We was mentioning this before we got on the air. This is his second time on, but you got to go way, way back in the archives there to find him. He and his wife were on for an episode previously, but we've got Brother Jordan Hughes on with us here tonight. Jordan's the father of two, going on three, so congratulations there. Married to his wife, Cass. They live in the Wise County area. And Jordan, I got to get this right here, is a consultant with CGI. So I wanted to make sure I got that title right there for him. So, Jordan, thanks for hopping on and being a part of the new episode tonight.
Yeah, excited to do it again. It's been a long time, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think the last time we spoke on missions, so we're going to kind of keep it topic-based. I guess to kick it off, I think probably the most common question we hear about church planting, especially here in the Bible Belt, my goodness, you can't drive outside your house hardly and not see a church somewhere around the corner. So with so many churches in our neck of the woods, why do we need another church?
Yeah, I think for us personally, when we decided to plant a church, it was never specifically about comparing ourselves to other churches, looking at, it's not like we were seeking out an opportunity or anything like that. We weren't looking for a title or any of those things. So for us, it was just, what we wanted in a church, studying the scriptures to see if, our desires align with God's word. And then lastly, and most importantly, praying for God to work it out, if that would be His will for us to plant a church. And some things just kind of fell in place, as I'm sure we'll get the chance to talk about, that really, made it evident to us that, we were doing something that seemed to be the will of God. And I think the fruit has shown that we are.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And I want to define a couple terms here before we get jumping in, because I think when we sort of talk about our story, and I'm sure other people that are listening who have went through the church planning process might have something similar to say about this, but we are currently in a former church building, but we would not consider ourselves a church revitalization, which is a very common term that gets tossed around today. Do you want to explain the difference to people between church planning and then church revitalization?
Yeah, and I think the most important thing to remember is the church is not a building.
Right.
And for us, we planted a church in a building that used to be a church. But when you think about church revitalization, I think there are members there or people there that are looking to revitalize their church. And whether that means, a new pastor coming in or new leadership coming in or merging with another church, those tend to maybe fall more into the category of revitalization. But planting is really starting a church with a group of believers who are not tied to a church prior to. You might be involved in other churches, but you're not actually, revitalizing a current church.
Yeah, it's very grassroots. You're starting, I'd probably say, from the ground up almost, really. Whereas revitalizing, you're taking a body that is already there, that it may be wounded, that there could be a different set of circumstances, and I think they're all different. But to revitalize, I think, like you said, is just simply to take a body that's there and help them grow, whether it be new leadership, change of pace as far as some of the structure of the services and things of that nature. But yeah, let's talk about us for a second, because again, we could talk about other church plants that we're aware of, but let's just go ahead and stay here close to home. And my prayer is that this will be helpful to people that either A, are in the process of that or considering that. I know you and I both have probably talked to people who are certainly considering it, prayerful about it, may have already walked through that, and maybe we can help them out right now in this regard. And maybe there's some listeners out there that are been praying and considering themselves, and maybe we can help answer some questions along the way here as we dig into it. So let's rewind here about 3 years or so and explain to people really how we got started, so our story, so to speak. So if you want to kick it off, and I'll maybe jump in there and fill in the gaps, but tell everybody how we got going.
Yeah, I think we could honestly go back 5 or 6 years of us, kicking around the idea, throwing it out there, and just, almost jokingly talking about how we'd like to do it one day. And I think it was more of a dream and never really saw it being feasible. But we go back 3 years ago, October of 2020, you and I and some other brothers are in Myrtle Beach on a golf trip, something we've done for many years now, and
playing a lot of bad golf too while we're down there.
That's right. But I remember we were on our way back, and we were just talking about, I think the topic of the discussion was just, what we saw, what we thought a church should look like.
Yeah.
And just talking about how things, we grew up in churches that didn't quite always meet the criteria of what we felt like was biblical church at all times. And by no means do I think, that we ever, look down on other churches. I'm very thankful for, the way I was brought up, and I'm sure you are as well. And I don't think it was ever like a bash session. It was just, as we have grown in our walk with Christ, our desire for biblical church has strengthened and grown, and we were just kind of talking about that on the way back from Myrtle Beach, and the more we talked about it, I think 2 or 3 hours of conversation rolled around, and I think somebody spoke up and said, I don't remember who it was, said, why don't we pray about this?
Yeah.
Why don't we seek this out? And then very slowly and methodically, God just kind of started working things out. And,
I think by the turn of that year, you're right, like probably around Christmas into the new year, I think we all realized, this is more than just some conversation. And as the prayers kept being prayed and the conversations kept moving along, I think it was pretty apparent by everybody, the Lord's doing a work here. And like you said, it was nothing rushed. Nobody was trying to pressure anybody into anything. I don't think we, to borrow an old time phrase, I don't think we got ahead of the Lord by any means. And like you said, we just kind of committed ourselves to just asking, is this something that would be in your will and something that we could do? Talk to us as the turn of the year gets going and sort of how the rubber began to meet the road at that point.
Yeah, I think that we started meeting, rotating, I think, around our houses, and we met maybe once a month here and there just to kind of, discuss the feasibility and what our options were. And we would, share a Bible lesson during that time and have a meal and things like that. And just kind of a lot of brainstorming sessions that really led to, a lot of the things that we do, and talking about the importance that I think we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, of making sure that we do this slowly, making sure that we go through a process. And then kind of out of nowhere, we got access to a building, and it was really unexpected.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because I wanted you to fill our audience in. I mean, no kidding, that was an absolute work of the Lord for that. That honestly, if we really boiled it down, had been in the works for what felt like years and years and years before we even remotely thought about looking into a church plant. And it actually dealt with your family. So explain to the audience there how all that came about as far as the location and how we'd been praying about where we would meet.
Sure, and I want to preface this by saying I think our biggest hindrance and the thing we were most scared about was the people who were gathering and looking to do this were very geographically constrained. We were spread everywhere, and we still are.
Yeah.
But we were, we really struggled with the idea of, okay, if we do have a church, how on earth are we going to choose a location? Because we've got so many people who live in so many different directions. And I just remember talking to my grandfather, who owns a church building that has been in existence. That was in existence for almost 50 years, and his dad built it. My great grandfather built the church. They ran the church there for years. There was a pastor there in the late 90s, early 2000s, a man by the name of Kyle Akers, who pastored that church, and it kind of went to the wayside and just shut down in around 2010, and the building had just kind of been sitting there with no use. And my grandfather actually just asked us if we wanted to use it. And it's not too often that you have somebody looking to plant a church and then the building just gets thrown in their lap for free. And it was a huge blessing. I can't thank God enough and thank my grandparents enough for giving us the privilege and the opportunity, because I'm not sure. I mean, it could have happened without it.
Right.
It would have been very difficult with us as being as small as we were and being, all over the place like we were. It would have been very difficult. And it happened to be in Duffield, which ends up being pretty much the center point for where all of us are located. All of us drive about 45 minutes to get there every Sunday. And it kind of worked out as the perfect middle ground for all of us. That way nobody was making a tremendous sacrifice.
Yeah, we had people coming from basically all different directions, and again, just providence of God that happened to be in the middle. Like you can really roll it out on a map, and we couldn't have found a better location. We have people coming from, Wise County, Virginia, Russell County, Virginia. Of course, my wife and I living over here in Hawkins County, Tennessee, and Duffield, Virginia. It really is almost the middle ground, and so God being very kind there in that location. You mentioned it was almost like a perfect setting. And then we opened the doors. I remember that day that you brought me in, and he said, "We're going to do a little maintenance." And I said, "Yeah, that's fine. I don't think we'll have any problem with that." And you could just tell that your look was like, "No, I don't think you understand what I mean by maintenance." We opened the door. Tell us basically what we looked at when we first opened the door there.
Yeah, so as the audience can probably imagine, any building that sits for 10 plus years vacant acquires some problems, and my grandparents had used the building as a storage unit. So they had taken a lot of things, from their previous house. My great-grandmother got sick, and they needed to move from their house because their house had stairs, and they needed to move from there. So because they took in my great-grandmother, and so they downsized a little bit, and with their stuff, as grandparents do, they decided to keep it, and they stored it in the church building. So we walked into a building that literally had only a walkway to get to stuff. It was completely full of stuff.
And I mean, to the ceiling, right? I mean, it was to the ceiling. Like, we're talking about full here.
Boxes stacked, everything.
And the building itself, to let people in, I mean, it was an older building, like you mentioned, it had been built many, many years before. And so not just a building sitting for 10 years, but an older building. And so a lot of challenges coming with that. And, we just began to start cleaning out, basically, and having to, purchase another facility, basically, to keep that. And that way your family's belongings and stuff were taken care of. And so that was a hurdle that we had to jump through. But we had time, and I remember, everyone still participating in their local churches, still very active members where they were at, still faithfully serving. And what time we had, we basically just sort of committed to cleaning that facility and renovating. Carpet had to be ripped up, new flooring. There was an entire floor in what is now a nursery room that had to be completely replaced, just simply because it was rotting in the back. So it seemed like we had a lot of hurdles along the way. You remember any other challenges and sort of maybe high points, I guess, we had before we even got rolling?
I look back on that time as just like one of the great blessings of my life, because I look at, the years I've been in ministry, and I look back at that time and seeing how people just came to support us.
Yeah.
People who weren't even going to be involved in our church plant that just wanted to help in some way. And, the people who were going to be involved pulling double duty, still active in their church and, teaching Sunday school and being assistant treasurer and things like that. But on their Saturdays and their days off, coming to our location to sweat a lot, to do a lot of manual labor to get our facility ready. And I look back at that time and think, if we can get through that, we can get through anything.
Yeah. And it was painting, new flooring being laid down, lighting, cleaning roofs and gutters, gravel all throughout a new parking lot that eventually wouldn't have to take place, landscaping. It was a full overhaul that had to go into there. And like you said, we had to really take our time on that. Let's sort of get into the behind the scenes of everything, though. I mean, people could drive by and see the work that was going on there, and signs being put up and renovations. But there's also a lot of things behind the scenes that, if you're a church planner and you're involved in this, that I would like to bring to your attention. And I'm sure some of these people are aware of this, but for those that may not be, let's talk about a little bit about the red tape involved in this and some of the things that we had to, the hoops, I guess, we had to jump through. So explain to everybody from your recollection about sort of the legal documents and the financial requirements that go into this.
Yeah, I honestly think we have to give credit to a lot of the pastors that we reached out to during this time, because I don't know that we even realized what we were getting into when it came to those things.
Right.
And fortunately, we met with some pastors who were very, very kind to us and gave us a lot of information that we needed. Going through things like establishing church leadership, learning or typing up documents like a covenant, a constitution, confession of faith, and the importance of those things, and talking that over with the people who were going to be joining us as members about the importance of those things. And, as big as protecting the church and the elders there, but as little as, establishing, who's going to be doing what, and, the importance of those things. And, I can remember even you and I talking about some of the details, and I'm like, gosh, I never really thought about all these little things that had to be in there, like, having to, put in how we're going to close a meeting and different things like that seemed almost like, just nature because we've done it our whole lives. But those things had to be created.
Right.
And, they were very important because you need structure.
Yeah, even speaking to lawyers and making sure that we so-called crossed every T and dotted every I, because you're right. There were things, it was like weekly we would have conversations and think, by the way, we have to do this and we have to do this. And there were some hoops. So I would tell people out there that are in the process or considering the process, you need to be very patient with this. You are going to learn a lot of new things from the financial point of things, from the legality point. It's not, and I'm not trying to be, very Mr. Modern here, but things have changed over the last 50 to 75 years as far as getting a church started and the structure that goes into that. So something to think about as you go forward. And again, I would just caution you, be very patient about that. And like you said, ask questions from wise people. I'd have to shout out to a bunch of ministers that we talked to during that time that had planted or knew people that planted and had went through maybe some revitalizations of their own and maybe had updated their own covenants and constitutions. I remember we talked to guys about that. And, I know, worry on my part to say this, we also looked at some more prominent churches around the nation and looked at their structures and what was going well and what we knew we could do, as opposed to, here's a church of 1,000 people, when knowing good and well we're going to be running, 15 to 20. And so what does that look like for us? And so, I'm not ashamed to admit that we basically cherry-picked a lot of great ideas, and because we knew we want to get off the ground well here and try to jump through every hoop we could imagine before we ran across things that would kind of throw us off kilter. So here's another question. I don't know, one of the things that's probably on a lot of people's minds is about, well, how did you raise money for all this and how did that all work? So a couple of points to that. Number one, and we'll get to this question first. Why did we not choose to affiliate with a denomination or an association?
Yeah, I think that that's not really a complex answer that I wanted to, elaborate on.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be, controversial in any way. For us, it just wasn't something that was necessary. So we never pushed it. We were very, very fortunate. God, blessed us very much so by not giving us a lot of financial burden. And I think one of the great benefits of affiliating with a denomination or a conference or whatever it may be is, there are some financial benefits for that, to be able to get a loan get approved for a loan or get a grant or whatever it may be, or have other churches help support you financially. Another thing that, for us is, we were planting literally from the ground up.
Yeah.
We weren't, another church wasn't helping us plant. We weren't a sister of another church or anything like that. We were literally from scratch planting our own church. So the needs of denomination affiliation or conference affiliation were just something that never really came up for us. It was not ever really something that we needed to even consider, just because of how fortunate we were by the grace of God to be in the financial position we were in.
Yeah, that's 1,000% true. I mean, in a perfect world, I think you would have a sending church, because there's somebody to lean on and to help, at every step of the way, and they've got your back, and you're in good step with them. But like you said, we were doing this very independently, and it was no slight at anybody. There was no animosity anywhere. And I would tell people, there's good help out there. I mean, there are many organizations that can help church plants, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. My only caution would simply be, there's a strong chance you may be hitching your wagon, so to speak, with these people. So just be a little discerning in that regard. But yeah, there are many, many ways out there that you can go about raising the necessary funds when this happens. Just for us, like you said, it really wasn't a complicated answer. The Lord was very kind to us, and we were very, very blessed to not have a lot of overhead. And I want to say this too, that of the families that we planted with, and I don't want to name names here just because I'm sure I'd forget somebody, but they were tremendous at being generous in that process. And I want to say this to their credit, and I hope they're hearing this, and I want everybody to hear this as well that was involved. Nobody quit giving to their local church during that time.
Yeah.
They were extremely faithful to continue the work that they were doing where they were at, because they committed there as faithful members. And the Lord blessed us enough to be able to go the extra mile for this church plant during that time. And I don't ever want to forget that as believers, but as brothers and sisters together. I was just so fortunate to watch that play out with people. And I think, and you and I had this conversation before, that was something that really jumped off the page to us as almost like a confirmation from the Lord of like, hey, everybody's in, and everybody has bought in together, and we know that because the actions are lining up with the words. So that was
absolutely.
A huge blessing for us. Yeah. And again, like I mentioned, I understand why people would go out and seek help. I completely get that. I don't look down on that at all. And every situation's different. So if you're listening to this and you have a sending church, praise God for that. If you are joining up with an organization, praise God for that they exist to be able to help you out there. But again, use discernment, and that'll sort of bleed into what we want to talk about here next. We had to form, and by the way, this is legally binding. We do have to have this, but also it's very important as a church, period. But our constitutions, our covenants, our confessions of faith, explain to the audience why those are so important and why it's extremely vital to be thorough in your wording when you're talking about issues and the doctrines that you have to address there in those papers.
Yeah, I think most importantly, it's important for the people who are going to be a part of your church.
Yeah.
That's the most important portion of it, is establishing what we believe at our church, what is going to be preached at our church, and what is going to be sought to be accomplished if it's God's will at our church. That is the most important thing about the documentation that we did. But also, what a lot of people advised us about that we really weren't. I think that if we look back, 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, when we started making this documentation, like, of course, what I just said was at the top of our minds. That was at the forefront of our minds. We wanted to, establish paperwork that told people who we were and what we were about and what we were looking to do at Calvary Bible Church. What we didn't think about was some of the reasons for doing it from a protection standpoint.
Yeah.
And just making sure that we were covering controversial issues and making sure that we had documentation about those things. That way, when we needed to take a stand on the Bible, we had something to back it up.
Right.
Whatever that may be, whatever that situation may be, we had something on paper that said Calvary Bible Church or an elder of Calvary Bible Church can refuse to do this because it's in their constitution.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And we were actually advised on that legally, not just by ministers who did, help us out mightily in that regard, but we actually sought out legal help. And I don't think there was anything wrong with that at all, because remember, we're talking about things that were somewhat just foreign to us as far as the way we went about it. Yeah, we did look at other people's constitutions and covenants and their statements of faith and confessions, and that was very helpful to see how other people had worded it, and more modern ones for that matter. Like you said, there's some very controversial issues out there that we had to address, and we went back multiple times and added in and struck out things on purpose after we'd read through it, shared it with other people, got their opinions on it, certainly gave it out to the ones that were planning with us, these founding members, and thankfully, by God's grace, like you mentioned, we were all on the same page. But there were some very hot button issues that we had to put in there, and I'm glad we did, because like you said, that can kind of put you at ease a little bit, because this is the 21st century. There are things that I think most churches are eventually going to have to face, and like we were counseled on, you better have it in writing.
And something else I would say to anyone looking to plant a church or even revitalize a church, there is something you're not thinking of.
Right, exactly.
And that was something that I look back and I give a lot of credit to the people who we leaned on to give us the advice, because let's be honest, like when you're looking to do something like this, you're gung-ho, you're excited, you're thinking about all the things, you're ready to go and tackle, ministry. That's what you want to do. You want to get out, preach the word, and do an awesome thing in a community. Well, the fact is, you still have to go through some red tape, and it may seem monotonous and it may seem pointless at times, but doing it early and doing it first are very, very important.
Yeah, that's a good point. In the documents that we ended up covering, I would just share with people, you're going to be covering things like obviously basic core beliefs. These are things that you're going to be writing out, church leadership structure, qualifications for membership, and that process are in there. And like you mentioned, controversial issues that may have to be faced, whether it be through the preached word, the taught word, membership responsibility, or even things through the church like marriage and things along those lines. And then obviously money's being spent, saved. There's a lot of financial talk in there that you'll have to go through as well. So just be prepared. It's a slew of things. I mean, it's large quantities of time it's going to be spent having to be dedicated to that. So it's no easy task. And there again, like I said earlier, just bring your patience with you, because you're going to need it. And it's a good learning process. Like you mentioned, there was a lot of things we didn't see coming. And that's a good question to follow up with here. Anything stood out to you that we haven't mentioned that we just never saw coming and just stands out in your mind like, boy, how about that time?
Yeah, something I was hoping we would really get to talk about, because I just said, you're going to forget something. And we forgot something pretty important. And I don't even like to talk about it, but I do want to talk about it for the audience, because I want to make sure that people take this seriously. And we made a mistake and did not have a church security plan.
Yes.
And just to kind of give us a quick story, one Sunday morning when we were having our normal worship service, Jeremiah was preaching. We had someone walk into our church during the middle of service and cause a little bit of a disturbance. And because we didn't have a plan, we didn't know what to do. We were really thrown off by it, and fortunately there was no violence or anything obscene that happened. It was just a man who seemed to be out of his mind a little bit, who walked into our church, and he scared our church people. Let's be honest. It was a scary scene. So that is definitely something that I cannot put at the top of the that's got to go at the top of the priority list. I have a plan in place in the event something like this happens. And I'm not saying, you have to get into, all kinds of details, but you just need to have some kind of plan in place in the event some kind of disturbance happens. That way you're protecting your congregation.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was probably the best example there, really, of we thought we had covered everything. I mean, really, like, again, you go back, we spent nearly a year putting that together from scratch. And like you said, there's always something that you forget. And, I hated that for the people that day. That was a pretty tense situation. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed and it was quelled out pretty quickly. I think you and some others handled that really well for what, was thrown on you immediately. And we were able to continue on and nobody was hurt. But like you said, that was one thing we just did not cover. And it was a headache and a problem. And fortunately, we've, I guess, learned the hard way. I guess that would probably be the way to put it. But there's other things, too. I would tell people that one definitely is at the top of the list of, that was serious. But there's also going to be a lot of headaches along the way. Like, nobody ever foresaw me trying to literally help build a floor in the back of a building with zero construction background whatsoever. So those things happen, bug issues, just all sorts of things that come with it. Parking
Yeah, you're
lot.
definitely going to serve in a lot of roles that you never really thought about. That's if there's been a headache about it all, it's just that you go in and you think, Jordan and Jeremiah are going to lead a church and be elders at a church and pastor a church together. What does a pastor do? Well, a pastor studies the word and he preaches and teaches the word effectively. He ministers to his congregation. Pastor does a lot more than that too. And, we've learned that the hard way.
Yeah, be ready to change uniforms fast and often because it's going to happen, and that's okay. Again, that's good for everybody to learn. It's good to learn different forms of service because one thing that I've learned probably more than anything, I now appreciate all those offices and positions and the work that people do because I've had to dig in a little bit there. And you realize really quickly people are gifted for different things. And yeah, you can serve in certain capacities sometimes in areas, but I think the Lord has people for that can do it better. But in those small settings like we had originally and still working through those, you just got to be prepared. Like it may be your turn to lay the flooring this week or do the painting or organizing the Sunday school or picking out songs for the worship service. We just, like you said, we've worn a lot of hats. We've learned a lot. I think we really have. We've learned a whole lot about the process, and I'm sure there's plenty more along the way.
I would say one thing to somebody who's looking to, start a church, I would say to them, your congregation, when you first start a church, will grow a vast appreciation. They're going to appreciate you for preaching the word. They're going to appreciate you for your study time. They're going to appreciate you for your prayers.
Right.
But you want to see their appreciation, get your hands and feet dirty and do things that are not expected of you. Like do things like, mop the floors and, weed eat around the facility and do all those things. And you'll see your congregation really appreciate you and grow. You'll grow so close to them instead of just passing the buck on to somebody else.
Yeah. Anything you would do different or you wished we would have done different?
I really don't have any regrets, and I'm curious if you have any. I think back to how we went about this, and I give God a lot of credit for how patient we were and how we sought out help and we asked a lot of questions. And I know we missed things. We just talked about we missed things. But all in all, I feel like, God has been in this throughout the whole process. We have seen so many different avenues of fruit that I'm so thankful to Him for. And so, no, I can't think of anything that I would do differently.
Yeah, I don't think anything off the top of my head either, because things have been worked out so well by God. It would be easy for me to sit back and if we had something really, really terrible that had happened and went south for us, I'm sure we would be able to say something in that regard. I would say, I think the best piece of advice that we got when we first got started is going to sound almost very elementary, and yet I think it was the difference. And we sat in a meeting one time with a minister, and we talked about what's the most important thing we should do, or that your advice to us to be, and his advice was to pray often. And I think that made the difference. We did. We had committed to prayer, and I think that helped us be more patient along the way, because there was headaches along the way. It felt like setbacks, but as well as I knew now, looking back at it, we just simply weren't ready. I mean, that we needed more time to prepare ourselves to minister well to people, and the Lord knew that far more than we did. And I think that was just His grace allowing us to take a step back and slow down a little bit. And like that minister had told us, pray often. And I think that was one of the best things we did when we got together with one another, with the groups, and we met monthly. We prayed, and we made sure to remind other people to pray. And we prayed about difficult things. I remember having conversations, and you could probably speak to this as well. There was a little anxiety about leaving churches that we were grounded in. And by God's grace, from what we understand, nobody left on bad terms. Nobody left with bitterness. Nobody left with causing division or hurt towards anybody. But that was hard. It wasn't easy. We love those places. We still love those places. We pray for those people. We've got nothing good to say, or nothing but good to say about them. But that was hard, and I would encourage people that are considering this plan, especially if you're leaving somewhere you've been grounded in a while, that is not going to be easy. And prepare your family for that. Would you have anything more to say to it?
Yeah, I would just say do it right.
Yes.
Do it the right way. Have conversations with the pastor at the church you're at. If you're looking to, join a church plant, have those conversations. Don't leave people blindsided. Give people thorough notice. I look at some of the people in our congregation now who were fulfilling obligations, and I'm so proud of them for, giving proper notice and letting them know. And honestly, I look back on it and I look at those churches, and they were so supportive of it.
Yes.
They were happy for them. They were happy for us.
Yes.
And, I think that has a lot to do with the fact of it was done the right way. They just didn't leave in the middle of the night.
Right. Yeah, just as an example, I mean, the church that I was coming from, Crossway Baptist Church, just tremendous people, and by God's grace, Lord willing, in a few weeks, I'll be preaching there for them. And again, that's a grace of God that He allowed a good separation, and people who knew good and well that this is not a leaving because they're mad, this is a leaving to go do the Lord's work. And we're still on the same page. We're still on the same team. We're still part of the same church that the Lord Jesus is building. And I'm with you. I'm very proud to know those people, that they did it the right way. And I'm with you on that. I think that's a good point that you made there. Let's close out here really quickly and just explain to people where we're at. If you're in our area, let them know where our address is and times of service, and how they can find us online too.
Yeah, so we're in Duffield.
It's in Virginia, by the way. Yeah,
Duffield, Virginia. That's right. We're at Piper Drive in Duffield, and that's right off US 23. So you can't miss us if you're on US 23 coming to Duffield. You really can't miss us. We're right off the highway. We have Sunday morning worship service at 11, and then our second and fourth Sundays we are doing Sunday school at 10 a.m. And I got to stop and say it. Just one more piece of advice when I bring up our service times: be fluid and be willing to try different things. We have, with us being so far away from our church, we've had to try a lot of different things. We do a lot of online Bible studies throughout the week, and we don't meet as often in person just because of the time constraints of driving. We have some people that drive over an hour, and a good portion of our church. So, be fluid and be willing to, adapt and try different things, but don't let that compromise anything. That's one thing that I would also say.
Yeah, we also meet first Wednesday of each month. We do have an in-person service there. That's at 7 o'clock. And like you mentioned, we have online studies throughout the week for men and women to get together in smaller group settings to study. So we're not taking weeks off per se, but like you mentioned, there is some flexibility there because of just the geographic issue that we face. So again, service at 11 on Sundays, on the second and fourth Sundays of the month. We have Sunday school at 10 before that. And again, the first Wednesday of the month, we meet at 7 o'clock there on location. So if you want to reach out to us by email, you can reach me. That's jreiner07 at yahoo.com, or you can reach out through our Deeply Rooted podcast. That would be DRIGW18 at gmail.com. Jordan, why don't you give them your email if people want to reach out to you for info as well?
Yeah, we have a church email account that I have access to that I'll share with you. It's Calvary Bible Church, 4 at gmail.com. So you can always reach out to me there or on social media as well. We have, I'm on social media, and then we have a church Facebook page. Would be a great place to reach out to us.
Yeah, you can find Calvary Bible Church there on Facebook. Like Jordan mentioned, you can find us online. I know he's got social media accounts. I do as well. You can find me there on Facebook or Twitter. Just an easy follow-up just on my name to search it there. So if you ever need to reach out to us for any issues, if you want more information about the church, or if you want more information about church planting, we'd love to talk to you and give you any help that we can. Again, we're novice to this as far as that's concerned, but we have been through a little bit, and I think we could at least encourage you on some aspects and help you. And if we don't know the answer, I'm confident we can find some people that can, because we were very fortunate to meet people that were way ahead of the game on us and are doing some great work right now. So we definitely can help out in some regard there for you. Other than that, we appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to us. If you haven't done so, remember, go on over and subscribe and hit that like button and send us a review on YouTube and Apple Podcast. Speaking of YouTube, you can actually find our audio sermons on there. We have a YouTube page, Calvary Bible Church. We've been working through the book of Luke literally this entire time since we began. We're going to be kicking off, Lord willing, chapter 15 this coming Sunday. So we're just expositionally walking through the entire book there. But again, you can find that on YouTube as well. Also, find our Deeply Rooted podcast on Facebook as well. And if you haven't done so, check out the website at deeplyrootedpodcast.com. I think that's got all the info out of the way, and we've covered about as much as we can cover for a church that's about a year and a half old. So, we're going to sign off here. Thanks again for being on the podcast, though, my man.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, again, thank you guys for listening, and we hope you all have a great week in Jesus.